Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. So, Ryan from Happy Healthy Vegan loves to post his blood tests. At least that's what he says. Great. Let's analyze them. Look, I'm no doctor or expert, and I give no health advice. However, attack the argument, not the hominid, okay? So, in November of 2013, Ryan posted his first blood test as a 3-year vegan. Like most vegans, Ryan posts few markers and even fewer of the more important ones. Be that as it may, his fasting blood glucose was 89, so okay. His HDL cholesterol was 47, thus decent, while his triglycerides fairly high at 164, which gave a triglyceride HDL ratio of 3.5, indicating a high risk of heart disease, refuting this belief that a plant-based diet makes one heart disease proof. His vitamin D level was low at 35, B12 was 442, so not yet deficient. He said he takes no vitamins or supplements. At that time, Ryan struck me as this humans are herbivores, anti-big pharma, or anything mainstream vegan. You know, the victim mentality stricken cognitive dissonance having happy hippie raw fruitarian monkey wannabe vegan. Because evolution is devolution. A vegan who fails to see that he's actually pushing mainstream medical ideology and dietary dogma. Anyway, few years later, Ryan posted a blood test from 1999 when he was an obese emo rockin' sad dieter. What are the chances that, as a pudgy touring musician, Ryan was not only eating trash at all kinds of hours, not getting quality sleep, not exercising, but also indulging in drugs and alcohol? But onto that test. Some 20 years ago, his fasting blood glucose was 97, so pretty elevated and only 3 points from pre-diabetes diagnosis. But this reading is just a snapshot, unlike hemoglobin A1C, which he didn't post, which would have given us a 2 to 3 month blood sugar average. So while we do not know his average blood sugar level, his fasting blood glucose as a 3-year, no longer obese vegan, eating far less junk food and exercising religiously, perhaps no longer indulging in drugs or alcohol, does seem to be improved. Back in 1999, his HDL cholesterol was only 38, so very low, and his triglycerides elevated at 193, which put his triglyceride HDL ratio at a pretty high 5.1, suggesting a high risk of heart disease. So these few cherry-picked markers Ryan provided did improve after 3 years on the plant-based diet. But his 3-year vegan markers were still not perfect, nor quote-unquote heart attack proof. And did his bloods improve due to cutting out animal products or simply eating less junk? Or did diet have nothing to do with this and it's the exercise and the cessation of various bad habits? Moving on. Even though Ryan claims to love posting his blood tests and brags about California providing those for free, for some reason he took a 4-year hiatus from posting videos that gained him above average viewership. Why would this clickbaiting, desperate for content creator do that? Did Ryan's health hit the proverbial wall around that 4 to 5 year mark that so many ex-vegans talk about? Did this supposedly all-natural anti-supplement lifestyle kick his butt? Did Ryan not post his bloods for 4 years because they got worse? Ryan comes back 4 years later with another blood test, except now he openly admits to supplementing B12.
So full disclosure, I do a small amount of B12 supplementation. My almond milk is fortified with B12, and I have a sublingual spray that I use maybe twice a week, so I'm not really hardcore about it.
Clearly, he no longer believes vegans don't need supplements, admitting that the vegan diet is nutrient deficient. Did he ever make that concession, if even to himself? Did he ever apologize for misleading his viewers, putting them at risk for deadly nutrient deficiencies? He cannot admit he was wrong. This would question his credibility, and there's no room for questions in ideology. The agenda must be pushed by any means necessary. Cognitive dissonance ignored. Anyway, him starting the supplement does lend credence to my theory that he started experiencing problems, perhaps due to vitamin deficiencies. What other supplements is he now taking? And just because a blood test states that his serum B12 levels are now adequate, that doesn't actually mean his body is metabolizing this synthetic vitamin. To be more certain, Ryan should test his homocysteine and methylmalonic acid levels. But no vegan ever does. Weirdly enough, Ryan now brags about his artificially high synthetic B12 levels. Then, he compares those to serum B12 of the average Canadian, whom he labels an average meat eater. This is misleading because Canadians are also vegans and vegetarians, and they all eat mostly plants, and most don't supplement like Ryan does, which may suggest that most people are eating too much plant food and not enough B12 containing animal products. A fair comparison, Ryan, would be between supplement-free vegans and strict carnivores. And while Ryan brags about his artificial B12 levels being higher than those of the average Canadian, when he wasn't supplementing, they were actually lower. Then, Ryan claims his vitamin D level of 37 is quite strong when he's almost deficient, while consuming foods fortified with vitamin D.
One of the major manufacturers, Almond Breeze, which Ryan often picks up.
And as far as those established vitamin ranges go, many experts and even whole countries argue that they are far too low. Whatever the case may be, Ryan is on the low side for sure, but claiming the opposite. This is the aforementioned cognitive dissonance. Ryan also brags about having normal serum protein levels, even though he has just barely enough, as per this established range, which we cannot be sure is optimal in the first place. But even if the protein levels in his blood are supposedly healthy, protein is your body's building block, and Ryan has very little muscle mass, which does not correlate well with longevity. Ryan is very thin and has no muscle definition despite the fact that he is an avid weightlifter and an athlete. Suppose Ryan were to include healthful animal products in his diet without altering his lifestyle, all the while putting on noticeable muscle mass and burning fat. That would likely happen. Would anyone take that as a symptom of a detrimental dietary change? Long story short, Ryan may not be protein deficient to a point where he's dying, at least according to this established dogma. That by no means proves that his protein levels are optimal, and scientific knowledge, common sense, and anecdotal data all suggest that they are not. When it comes to his lipid panel, he's weirdly apologetic. Ryan seems completely ignorant of the latest cholesterol research and or does not know how to interpret his lipid panel. He does recognize that his HDL was quite good on this test, but will gloss over this market when his future tests show worse levels. His reading of blood tests is cherry-picked, and he uses convenient reasoning rather than any standards. What's more interesting is that he tells us that the next time he takes the test, he will modify his diet to make it look subjectively better, then seems to pretend that what would be a manipulated result is somehow reflective of his baseline diet. So prior to his next test, he will stop eating fat, he says, inevitably replacing it with sugar, believing that will lower his largely irrelevant LDL, thus making him healthier. But what he doesn't tell you is that that will also lower the very important HDL while raising his blood sugar. How is cutting out the essential nutrient fat while replacing it with non-essential carbs, which will likely make his markers worse, how is that a helpful dietary change? Next, Ryan looks at his total to HDL cholesterol ratio, which is not a very good ratio to consider. But if we do agree that it is, he is at some risk for a heart attack, which once again goes against his vegan belief that a plant-based diet will make you heart attack proof. Once again, the dogma and reality do not align. The best ratio to consider when determining risk of heart disease is the triglyceride HDL ratio, and on this test, his comes to about 2.5, which is not bad, but still above the optimal ratio of 2. So even by this far better predictor, Ryan is not what we would consider heart attack proof. But what about Ryan's triglycerides? This time they're 142, or just 8 points away from being too high, but he calls them perfectly healthy. They're not, especially in the context of the two aforementioned lipid ratios. In other words, should his triglycerides drop, so will his heart disease risk. according to both current medical dogma and the latest research. Ryan's hemoglobin A1C of 5.3% was okay, but not optimal. His average blood sugar level is 111 milligrams per deciliter. Average, meaning that his high-carb diet of frequent meals has his blood sugar level fluctuating wildly, which is very unhealthful. What's interesting is that he doesn't show his fasting blood glucose this time around. Does it not compare favorably to when he was a SAD dieter? He does compare his triglycerides from both tests as a proxy measure for diabetes, so why not the more relevant fasting blood glucose? Why is he hiding it? Lastly, Ryan mentions his supposedly good blood pressure, but shows no evidence. He says he's in much better health than the patients that his doctor sees. So he's in better health than sick people. Okay. Next comes his 8-year vegan blood test. I guess his viewers had pointed out that Ryan hides some of his results, like he did his fasting blood glucose. Then again, who cares if he shows his entire blood test when the best way to hide a marker is to not get it tested? People have also called Ryan out for talking about blood pressure but not showing it, so now he posts a picture of a blood pressure monitor. Assuming this is his reading, it's still just a snapshot. To have a more accurate idea of what's going on, we'd need to see an average taken at regular intervals and multiple times a day. This could be the lowest reading at any point during the day, with other readings going above the normal range. And do we even know if Ryan takes blood pressure medications, homeopathic or otherwise? Sorry, but I feel compelled to question his honesty given his track record, given that he has a habit of calling everyone who disagrees with him a liar, while never providing any evidence of actual dishonesty. Could he be projecting? Once again, Ryan brags about his artificially high B12 levels, only this time they are too high. Is he so not hardcore about supplementing B12 that he's now flirting with B12 toxicity? Why does he accept the established market ranges only when convenient? He seems to believe that his hemoglobin A1C is perfectly fine when he's only 0.3% away from being diagnosed as pre-diabetic. What's more important is that his hemoglobin A1C has gone up 0.1% from his test from a year ago, so his average blood sugar has risen. Moreover, his fasting blood glucose was 90, which is pretty high. What's interesting again is that as a 3-year vegan, it was at 89. So even though he believes he's eating the most healthful diet, his blood sugar level seems to be climbing, both according to his fasting blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C. And again, he did hide his previous fasting blood glucose result, did he not? His vitamin D comes back at 27. He's deficient. But he makes no apology or concession to Chris Kresser after ridiculing him for saying that the vegan diet will lead to deficiency. So Kresser was right, logically, and once again, Ryan was wrong. Yet, Ryan still pretends he's credible, while anyone who disagrees is a liar. Okay. Ryan excuses this test result by saying that the test was done in December when it's not as sunny in sunny California. But what this may suggest is that again, vitamin D reference ranges are indeed too low. In other words, if you can be within what's considered normal range at 37 in the summer, but drop down to 27 in the winter, in sunny California nonetheless, you probably did not store enough vitamin for the entire year during the summer. Thus, the reference range should probably be higher, or at the very least be conditional on the season, your diet, or where in the world you reside. And again, Ryan does supplement vitamin D, if only inadvertently, with fortified foods like almond milk. And again, he lives in sunny California where he spends much time outside shirtless. Still, he's vitamin D deficient because his diet doesn't contain any real vitamin D3. Duh! Next, he recognizes that his HDL is pretty high at 57, but also says that it has always been so. That's not true, Ryan. Your HDL was both 38 and 47 before. Anyway, Ryan was worried about his so-called high LDL, so he got his lipids tested again, with no change there. Did the HDL and triglycerides change? Once again, Ryan hides some test results. Most recently, came Ryan's 9-year vegan blood test, where right off the bat, he defends his high carbohydrate consumption as if to preempt the obvious conclusion I will make in just a second.
Let's see if I'm diabetic, because anti-vegans out there like Eric Berg say people like me who eat a high carbohydrate rich diet should be diabetic.
How much carbohydrate do we need, or how much do we require? 0. We don't need carbohydrates. In fact, we're better without carbohydrates.
Oh really, Dr. Berg?
So while Dr. Berg is telling Ryan to cut carbs, Ryan keeps slamming down his 14 banana and sugary almond so-called milkshakes, while both his fasting blood glucose and, more importantly, hemoglobin A1C keep climbing. In the last 2 years, Ryan went from 5.3 to 5.5%, or only 0.2% away from being diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Diagnosed. But there's a problem with this diagnosis. What's inexplicable is that the medical world doesn't use fasting insulin levels to diagnose diabetes. Blood glucose levels are just a proxy marker for diabetes and not a very good one. Ryan's pancreas, in order to deal with his high sugar diet, could have been producing increasingly high levels of insulin for many years already, which is very deleterious to health, while also keeping his blood sugar level within what's considered normal. So Ryan could actually be insulin resistant, which won't show measuring only blood glucose. The only way to know is to test fasting insulin. So while technically not yet considered pathogenic, both his blood sugar markers are very alarming, especially in the context of his high sugar diet. Not only is he close to being pre-diabetic as defined by questionable proxy markers, but there's also the trend of his blood sugar level rising. And insulin-sensitive people eating a high-carb diet tend to have much lower fasting blood sugar levels and hemoglobin A1C. So again, Ryan needs to get his fasting insulin checked to see if he's on his way to full-blown diabetes. But this is the problem with most vegans. They buy into this drug-peddling medical industry dogma and don't know how to interpret blood tests or what markers to test in the first place. They don't seem to know that most markers are just snapshots that must be put into context where trends are also acknowledged. Then, they also cherry-pick and misrepresent these markers while refusing to do any advanced testing. Vegans talk about their supposedly heart-healthy diet, but never post calcium artery scans to see if they actually have heart disease. Vegans extol the virtues of fiber, but never post gut microbiome profiles. They just hashtag ask Gojiman for help with their chronic diarrhea and constipation. Ryan worries about his high cholesterol, but says $200 for a calcium artery scan is too much money. Doesn't he have a job? Does he have atherosclerosis? His blood markers suggest he may. So, onto this latest lipid panel. His HDL of 43 is a significant drop from 57, with some organizations suggesting it should be above 45. And while Ryan was very braggadocious about his HDL of 57, after it drops 14 points, he just ignores this negative change. That's not very wise because combined with his moderately high triglycerides, his trig to HDL ratio comes out to 2.7, which could indicate that he is not heart attack proof. So when his HDL was 57 and his trig's 142, his trig HDL ratio was slightly better at 2.5. But in an attempt to lower his LDL cholesterol by eating less essential fat and more sugar, Ryan actually raised his heart disease risk, according to this better lipid panel predictor. Look, Ryan's blood test results aren't horrible and definitely better than the average sick Americans his age. But his blood sugar is creeping up, his HDL could be better, his triglycerides lower, and we don't know anything about his insulin or if he actually has heart disease. What could be said is that if Ryan were to go on a low-carb, high-fat diet, he would likely lower his triglycerides and definitely his hemoglobin A1C. And his HDL would go up, as it did when he neglected to cheat on his test by not eating saturated fat. But I guess we'll never know for sure because Ryan isn't really interested in optimal human health. He's an animal rights activist and a vegan ideologue. And he seems to believe that the vegan diet did improve his health, which again is a pseudo-scientific claim. Maybe Ryan is an outlier and this somewhat elevated blood sugar level is perfectly normal for him. Or maybe his blood sugar has been high for decades, doing lots of damage. To be fair, Ryan's lipid panel and fasting blood glucose were worse 20 years ago when he was an obese musician. But who knows what his lifestyle looked like back then? Did he drink and smoke? Did he party? Clearly, he did not take care of himself. Like many vegans, Ryan improved his lifestyle drastically by adding religious exercise and perhaps removing some vices, while also changing his diet. His cherry-picked blood markers have improved only slightly and only initially, and have been getting worse while on this supposedly healthful vegan diet, with the improved lifestyle factor intact. And we can't really be sure about his labs being better now, as he never tests the more relevant markers. At any rate, to say that his current diet is healthful is a ludicrous pseudoscientific statement. We simply don't have enough data to be able to say that, and there are too many confounding factors. Still, most 50-year-old Americans would be jealous of this blood test. Still, how is picking low-hanging fruit any evidence of excellence? Is Ryan really thriving as optimally as he could be? I don't think so. If I had to guess, I'd say he's somewhat insulin resistant, and it's his fanatical commitment to exercise and his refusal to eat much junk food or partake in past vices that have kept him relatively healthy. I seriously doubt that it's his high sugar, nutrient deficient diet. Such conclusion would be illogical, thus pseudoscientific. If I were Ryan, I'd ditch veganism. Well, I would definitely get my fasting insulin tested, and I would try to put on some muscle by increasing protein consumption, if only to create a sink for all that sugar he consumes, and for longevity's sake. And obviously, I'd eat less processed sugar, especially all that fructose. Hey Ryan, it would be great to see your fasting insulin levels, bro. Why not get those checked? In the name of science. How about your fructose-laden liver function? And while you're at it, get your gut microbiome sequenced. Because fiber and shit. And how about your partner Angie, huh? Some people are suggesting she doesn't seem very healthy. How come the she of happy, healthy vegan never posts her blood tests? It would be interesting to see how someone carving up as much as you, Ryan, is doing without any exercise. At any rate, I hope you liked the video. If you haven't yet subscribed, you may want to consider doing that. And if you would like to see more content such as this, it wouldn't be a bad idea to support the channel in any way you see fit. Yeah? Thanks again, and have a good day.
This one hit the heart, though it was meant for the brain. I guess I'm the one to blame with my fucked up aim. You got struck out in the game by default when we released this jewel from the CV vault.
With this shackle by your wrist with concrete for feet at the bottom of the abyss.